Okay, welcome everyone to the Livid Ladies podcast. My
Woo!
name's Julie and I'm with my friend Jane.
Hello.
Hey Jane, how's it going?
Hi, Julie. It's going pretty good. I'm actually like a little nervous.
I am too. I've never really done a podcast before and I'm excited to be doing it with you, but I'm definitely out of my element.
Yeah, I'm scared. Like I don't know, like we've been talking and chatting like this for years and years and years. This is like the basis of our friendship.
Yeah,
And it's just kind of weird when you are like know that you're being recorded. It's like a
totally.
yeah.
Totally. It's basically let's give our listeners, our whoever our listeners are, our non-existent listeners, a little background into the podcast. So basically this podcast is going to be a recording of our private everyday conversations pretty much. Is that
Yeah,
accurate?
listen in to our crazy little gossip rant fest.
Absolutely. Yeah, gossip, rant, vent sessions.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Um, yeah, maybe we can talk a little bit about who we are, why we're starting this podcast, where we hope it'll go. Sure, yeah. So I guess we can start with a little bit about us. So we've been friends for a few years now. I want to say we met, I don't even know, like 7 years ago, 8 years ago.
Oh, it's got to be longer than that. Yeah, like maybe eight. Well, okay, so maybe even almost 10 years.
Right, but we haven't really been friends. We weren't friends in the beginning.
That is true. This is
Right.
true.
So we met
My
like 10 years ago and we became
yeah, my
friends.
sister and you were friends first.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys were like besties. And my sister told you that I was evil.
Yeah. So I was like, I'm definitely not going to be friends with her. Um,
I'm a bad influence.
yeah, and we joke about it now, but like that was actually serious.
It
Like,
was actually like really hurtful at the time.
yeah,
Um, and I felt like she treated you more like a sister than me. And so I was
right.
kind of jealous in the beginning.
Yeah, totally.
But
Uh,
then she moved away, and you're younger than her. And you're actually
yes,
a little bit younger than me.
correct.
Um, so we were in college together then, and she was no longer there. And suddenly, we were,
Suddenly we clicked and we're like, wait, why were we not friends? Like
yeah,
at all? Yeah.
yeah. Because we
And the
were,
funny thing too, I feel like didn't we end up in some random classes together or did we plan that out? I feel like we didn't plan that out.
that's a great question because I think, so how I remember it is my senior year, we did plan having classes together.
Okay.
I had a couple of like stray prereq classes that I still
Same.
needed to take or whatever they're called, gen eds.
Gen Ed.
I of course had waited until my senior year to complete. And they just happened to sort of line up with what you were doing. And so I was like, oh, I can make this work and it would be way more fun to like suffer together.
Absolutely.
So I think we took like physics together and educational psychology.
Yep.
Yeah. Um,
Adolescent psychology, I think it was
adolescent
too.
psychology.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, where the professor quoted gave an entire Shakespearean monologue in the first lecture.
Yeah,
Um,
that guy thought he was really cool
he thought he was God's gift
to
to
the earth.
the campus.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah.
anyway, but before that, we were in a Christian fellowship group together. So I think that was really when we started sort of hanging out and talking. We realized we had a lot in common and that
Yes.
we had a lot of the same trauma and um, our parents have a lot of similarities. And
Mm-hmm.
we were both sort of like trying to figure out who we were and dating sort of seriously for the first time.
Yep.
And yeah, so we were sort of thrown together because of that group. Because then I think I was like the secretary of the group at one point, and then
Yep.
you were like, you were definitely the president.
At some point, yeah.
Yeah, and I think I was your VP for a little while.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
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 I don't actually remember like a specific moment where I was like, "Oh, we're friends now and we weren't before." Like there was some kind of revelation.
Wait, you said you do remember or you don't
No, I
remember?
don't. Like, I don't
Neither do
remember
I.
that.
Neither do I. I have no idea when that actually started. Like when we actually started talking and hanging out for real.
Yeah.
But I do remember one of the very first vent sessions that we had. And I feel like this has been a pattern since then in our friendship, is like having these long vent sessions
Mhm.
where we're able to just be like really honest with each other and we're able to support each other um, and get things off our chest. Like I remember we went to one of our unions on our college campus, and I think were we studying for one of our classes? I think we were studying for one of our classes
I
for
think
like a final.
it was right after spring break. Was it spring break or Easter?
Yes.
Somewhere in like sort of late spring, we had some big final coming up for a class that I'm pretty sure I was failing.
Yeah.
And instead of studying, I remember
Yes.
sitting in my pajamas because we've been up all night because of we have overnight Easter services.
Yes. So
So
yeah,
we,
I should mention too that Jane and I were raised in the same religion, which is Orthodox Christian. And for those of you who don't know, Orthodox Christianity celebrates Easter, or Pascha, as we call it in the Orthodox Christian tradition, and that involves an overnight, um, like all night liturgy.
term is all night vigil.
Vigil. I'm sorry, I'm a horrible Christian. I'm a horrible Orthodox, I should
Thank
say.
you.
But yeah, so it's like part of our tradition. I'm pretty sure. Did you come to my house that weekend for that Easter?
You know, growing up, Easter was such a big family thing for me. And so
Yeah.
my family had moved away, and then, my sister was then gone at this point. And so I think I kind of also clung to you and your family as sort
Yeah.
of a replacement in a way to fill that
Hmm.
big hole, the traditions that we were used to, and the big church service and just all of those things. So for me, it ended up being less about, the religious aspect and being super spiritual and being really pious, and more about um, family and sort of the traditions that go along with it. And that's kind of how I feel like now too.
Absolutely.
I was starting to sort of make that transition at that point too. But so it was so nice. Your family just like embraced me and let me stay there. And your mom made some just like amazing food, and she sent us home with this like insane package. We were like eating
Yes.
bread out of paper bags on the bus home.
Yeah.
And then we're like, oh shit, we should study. And I just remember
That's what it
sitting
was.
at the union in my pajama pants,
Yep.
like just having a freaking freak out session about like whether or not I should have sex with my boyfriend. And that was like,
Who is now your husband,
yeah.
by the way. Yeah. No, I totally remember that. And so anyway, all of that is to say that like our friendship, I feel like, has been kind of based in these vent sessions that we've engaged in. Like that's been a huge part of our friendship and of what keeps us close, I think,
Yeah.
is the ability to have these vent sessions to talk to each other. And I think that was our first like real big one.
Hmm.
And so I guess we're kind of hoping that this podcast will be a little bit of that, but maybe a little more polished and refined vent session.
Thanks for bringing it back around.
Yeah. I try.
Podcast.
I try. Yeah. No, but I mean, we do spend a lot of time just talking things out. And I think for us, it's important that we have a space to do that. And I think that's really why we wanted to do this podcast. Um,
Yeah, and I think too, like when I think about it, and I think about what sort of what we've been through and our unique journeys individually and also like together as friends, that like it's less about feeling regret or
mhm.
wishing things had been different, but more about like self-discovery and
Yeah,
processing the trauma and sort of moving forward. It's the insights that we come to together are like um, it helps me a lot
Mm-hmm. Oh,
to talk,
absolutely.
especially with somebody who understands, and we have so many similarities. And so it's
Yes,
kind of about like moving forward, informing our past, informing our future. Um, Also,
definitely.
the religious aspect for me is like sort of problematic because I'm still sort of trying to figure out what I believe, what I
Mm-hmm.
think about it. It's easy right now for me to just sort of avoid dealing with it because as, an adult, I don't have the pressure of like anyone telling me that I need to go to church. But when I look forward to our future and like potentially having kids,
Yeah.
I think about like, do I want my kids to be baptized? What do I want my future to look like? Am I going to have that like Pascha night whole
Mm-hmm.
thing with my own family eventually? Is that something that I want? Or is the trauma too much? Is it too dangerous to expose my family to that? Because I've had so many negative experiences.
Yes. Yeah.
That's something I really struggle with.
Yeah. Yeah, we've both kind of struggled with spiritual trauma, and I think, to be honest, you've been through a lot of spiritual trauma. Um like even more than what I've experienced, and not to make it into like a competition or anything,
No.
but I think that's a really good point. Yeah, that's definitely like something that we talk about a lot too. Is just like what we believe about religion and spirituality and God, and if we believe in any of the stuff that like we were brought up, um, you know, thinking was true. And I agree with you. I think it's our friendship, I think, is pretty special. Not only because we're supportive of each other, but like you said, we have a lot of really similar things that we've been through, and our backgrounds um, just are pretty similar in general with our religious upbringing. And I
Yeah.
think that's really unique. And it's not, some of my other friends, I love them to death, but they don't necessarily understand what it means to grow up in an Orthodox household, and not only a Orthodox household, but like a really strict one,
The super
uh,
traditional one.
extremely traditional. Yeah. And the impacts that that's had on pretty much every aspect of my life, and I'm sure on your life as well.
It does. It runs really deep. And for me, I mean, I was homeschooled and
Mm-hmm.
spent a lot of time feeling pretty isolated growing up. And then getting to college was just such a huge, like, adjustment and then, like,
Mm-hmm.
mindset shift. And I had to learn things so fast.
Yeah.
Um, and so then it's kind of only now that it's like I'm slowing down and sort of processing any of that or like I don't know. It's a lot, but
Yeah.
um it just it informed like my whole perspective on everything and I realized that I was just sort of brainwashed and like repeating things that my parents had told me my
Yeah.
whole life.
Same.
Um it really wasn't until college and honestly until I met my now husband that um he was somebody that really started challenging me like, well, what do you think about this? Or like,
Mm-hmm.
nobody really asked me or like cared about my opinion
Yeah.
necessarily. Um, and that was a huge deal too, is like I never really felt like I had the space
Mm-hmm.
to figure anything out on my own or that anybody cared what I thought or that,
Or that it mattered.
right. There was
Yeah.
no room for that. It was just like this is the truth of the capital T and this is what we
Yes.
believe and so I was just expected to like regurgitate all of that. And that's what I
Absolutely.
did for like my entire childhood and even through college to a point. And then I started being like, oh, you know what? I actually disagree.
For sure. Yeah.
So yeah, no, it runs really deep. And
It
I
does.
think even more than we realize, like only now am I even realizing like
Exactly. Yeah.
and the guilt. You always talk about religion and guilt and we'll get into this
Mm-hmm.
more, I'm sure, because again, it
Oh,
kind of
yes.
is a thread that runs through everything. But um, oh my God, I just wasted so much of my life feeling guilty and bad about everything.
Yes. Yeah. Guilt and shame, I want to say. Shame is like a huge one. And I think sometimes what I thought was guilt was actually shame.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
and I
funny.
think we can definitely we'll probably do a whole episode on guilt versus shame and how it relates to religious upbringing. Um, but yeah, there was just a lot of guilt and shame. And I think I agree with you. I can relate to that. I also wasted a lot of my time, and I still waste a lot of my time feeling guilty and ashamed um, about things that I can't always necessarily control.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I really hope, like you were saying earlier, I really hope that this podcast can be more of like an introspective look at kind of what we've been through and where we want to go with it. You know, like you said, like it doesn't have to be about regret or anger or all the ways in which our lives were unpleasant. It can be more of a podcast that looks to the future with a little bit of hope. And I think the way we do that is by talking things through, being honest with ourselves and each other. So I do really hope that this podcast can be that for us.
Yeah. So that's the idea. That's what we're
Yes.
shooting for. I also think we have some really good stories to tell.
Oh, we have some great stories to tell.
I think that our lives could be like a telenovela or a soap opera or you know,
A young
in,
adult novel.
yeah. So we definitely have some stories to tell, but I also hope that this is something that people can relate to, and
Mm-hmm.
that if nothing else, it's definitely healthy for me and helpful for me to talk it out. So,
Totally. This is basically going to be like extra therapy for me. So I see a
right.
therapist on like a regular basis, usually bi-weekly right now, but this is going to be so therapeutic for me. And it is therapeutic. Like anytime I talk to you and we get to hash things out, I feel like it's just so helpful for me. But yeah, not only therapeutic for us, but hopefully therapeutic for other people too who have been through similar things. I think it would have been really helpful for me when I was growing up if I had someone to listen to or look up to, or
Oh my God,
commiserate with.
can you imagine? Like,
Oh, our lives would have been so different.
right.
Seriously. Yeah.
Yeah. So with that in mind, when you look back on your life so far, um, what is one thing that comes to mind, the first thing that comes to mind that you would want to tell a younger version of yourself, a younger Julie?
Yeah. Yeah. First of all, I love that you asked that question. I know you told me you were going to ask it. And so I've been thinking about it quite a bit, but I love that question. I think the first thing that came to mind for me as I was reflecting on my life is I wish I could tell my younger self that, well, it's a two-part thing. So the first part of it would be I wish I could tell my younger self that that I'm important, that I matter,
Yeah.
that I'm valid, like, like that I'm worthy. I'm a worthy person just for being here and existing. I don't think I ever got that message. So that would be the first part of it. And the second part would be that it's okay for me to treat myself like I'm important and I'm worthy and I matter, and I'm valid. Like, actually, it's not only okay, it's really important that I treat myself that way, that I show myself compassion, that I am understanding with myself, that I practice love towards myself. So self-love, I think, would be a huge message that I wish I could impart to my younger self, because I think you can probably relate to this, Jane, but like we were never really taught that it's okay to be good to ourselves.
That's so
um,
true. Yeah.
and that's huge for me. I think what I realized lately is that I have a tendency to treat myself like shit. Like I still do it.
Hmm.
I still feel like I'm worthless and I'm worthless piece of shit and I deserve to be punished. And sometimes it's for like trivial things like, oh, I got really snippy with my husband and so I'm a piece of shit for it. Instead of being like understanding, like, oh, well, maybe you were going through something difficult at that moment and it's okay that you snapped. You can apologize, you can make it better and like keep moving forward. But yeah, I've just noticed this pattern where like, because I've always treated myself like I'm this shitty person, I kind of, not only do I treat myself horribly, but I also treat the people around me pretty horribly. And when I feel good about myself, I treat those around me in a much more positive way. So all of that is to say that I think I would tell myself to practice self-love and compassion, and not like woo-woo, bullshit, but
Right.
true self-compassion and self-love.
No, that's incredible, and honestly, like a lifelong goal
Yes.
for me
Yes.
as well.
Yeah, what would your answer to that question be if you could go back in time and tell young Jane, one thing, or let her know one thing? What would that one thing be?
I mean, I had a lot of similar thoughts, I think,
Mm-hmm.
about confidence. Um,
Yes.
and sort of what came to mind for me was I remember just torturing myself. And I think a lot of it was anxiety and undiagnosed anxiety and depression, which I
Mm-hmm.
realized now that I was struggling with for a very long time.
Yeah.
And that was shameful. You weren't, all you're supposed to need is your spiritual father in the church. And so, of course, that
Oh
was
yeah.
not okay that I would, need professional help of any kind,
Right.
or possibly medication. But,
Oh,
um, so when I think about looking back on who I was kind of as a kid, I think about how I would torture myself thinking about every past conversation that I'd had, um, you know, analyzing it, going over it,
mm-hmm.
feeling bad, like, oh, I shouldn't have said that, like maybe I offended that person or something. And a lot of times, because we'd go to like these family conferences or we'd be like visiting or whatever. And so I would think about this like when I had a moment or a quiet moment or before I went to bed or whatever. And then
Mm-hmm.
I would go apologize to the person involved. So I would go and be like, "Oh my gosh, like I just wanted to tell you like I'm so sorry if I,
Mm-hmm.
hurt your feelings or if I, like I shouldn't have said that. Like that was really bad." And like um and I was really little. Like I remember doing this as like a 6-year-old, like
Mm-hmm.
really young. And I got a lot of positive reinforcement for doing that.
Oh my God, I was gonna say yes.
Yeah. So I got a lot of like, "Oh, you're so cute. That's so sweet. Like what a thoughtful and
What a
good
good
child
little
you are."
girl. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I used that a lot as like a validation that I was okay. So
Mm-hmm.
initially it was like I feel guilty for breathing because I
Mm-hmm.
was taught that everything was a sin. And even I remember like honestly as like a 4-year-old, I remember being taught that like, you should be thinking that your thoughts could be bad. Like that we were taught that
Yes.
bad thoughts were a sin. So then I was constantly like editing my thoughts even as like a 4-year-old. And I had this fear of like dying.
Yes.
Because my mom would always say, that we are in this world but not of this world, and that really we're just living to um, you know, uh, do the best we can while we're living, but then really the whole goal is to like spend eternity with Christ, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
I remember like praying. There was a period of time where I was praying really, really hard as like a 4-year-old that I would be so good and I would become
Mm-hmm.
later on in life if only God would just let me live, you know. Um, so just stuff like that. And I think about how much time I spent like torturing myself and feeling guilty for everything. And it's that same kind of thing. Like if I could just tell myself that it's okay to make mistakes and
Yeah.
you learn from those mistakes and everyone makes mistakes and it's okay. And thinking back, like I've learned so many valuable things from trying something and failing, or
Yes.
exploring something and realizing it was really bad. And I still struggle with torturing myself about feeling guilty. Oh, I shouldn't have made that decision.
Mm-hmm.
How what was
Mm-hmm.
I thinking? But in the end, like something valuable always came from it. And so
Yeah.
I think I like exactly what you said. Like I need to love myself, and um, I learned really valuable lessons from my mistakes, and that's
Absolutely.
great. So
Yeah. How do you feel saying that phrase, like, I need to learn to love myself? I feel like there's still a part of me personally that kind of cringes a little bit because I was taught, and I'm sure you were taught, like, that's selfish. And, loving yourself, what is that? Like, God loves you, but don't let it get to your head. You shouldn't love yourself too much because then you get a big ego. You know what I
Right?
mean? Do you still
Yeah.
have any like visceral reaction to that phrase, like loving myself?
Yeah, there's always this small voice that tells me that's selfish. Yeah, like
Yes.
I mean, so my parents really preached like a mindset of like um what's the word I'm looking for? There's like it's that like the the media and like the
Mm-hmm.
worldly media, is basically like masturbatory, that like it's all
Mm-hmm.
about like, which I didn't know that word.
Self-indulgence.
And yeah, self-indulgence.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've only learned
Yeah.
that word in the past few years,
Yes.
but
Masturbatory?
yeah,
Yeah.
that would have been like such a dirty word to
Oh,
say.
you cannot use that word as a child. Absolutely not.
Yeah, yeah.
Also, you can't masturbate as a child because that's
Oh,
just completely shameful. And I
oh
think
my
this is
gosh.
why I have like still have sexual issues where I can't enjoy sex.
Another full episode
Oh,
we'll have to
absolutely.
talk about that. Yeah. Um No, but they were constantly preaching this, like, we're waging a war against like the worldly media and all these things. And so they actually like made a point to point out, how this ad was all about you and treating yourself and like, or, just how everything is all about you, and like taking care of yourself and blah, blah, blah. And like, that's a huge point, I think, for like marketing, which is
Yes,
because obviously like that's a great marketing tactic to like convince people that they
absolutely.
need this. But there, that was like a huge deal, was like pointing out, look at this campaign, like look at this ad in this magazine, or look at the words that they're promoting this with, like that's bad. And I was just like brainwashed into being like, that's
Hmm.
that's so bad, like, to take care of yourself or to enjoy something like that is like,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, totally. Which, okay, what do you think the benefits of self-love and self-compassion are? Because I know there are lots of benefits. And maybe what are some of the benefits that we didn't see when we were growing up?
I mean, so if I was gonna make an argument to my
Hmm.
parents right now, um,
Yes.
I would say that, there's that Bible quote that you have to remove the mote from your own eye before you can take out the beam from your brother's
Yes.
eye. That's kind of
Yeah.
how I feel about it. Like, you have to love yourself and take care of yourself, because if you don't spend time doing that or put energy into that, you can't help anyone else or do anything else. Like,
No.
if you're broken and dying, then you don't have the energy or space to put your energy anywhere else. And so
Yeah.
that's how I look at it, is like, that's kind of what I'm focusing on, is I have to take care of myself and figure out boundaries for myself, you know, doing all this work in therapy, like, trying to set it aside, you know, Jane time every
Yeah.
day, um, which is super hard and I fail all the time. But like, if I don't do those things, then I'm always maxed out completely emotionally. And then I will
Absolutely.
be irritable. I'm going to snap at people. Like, I'm not emotionally available. Like, it affects literally every part of my life in a super negative way. And so
Yeah.
that's, that's where, um, I don't know how to like explain that to somebody who,
Hmm.
um, has that sort of biblical
Hmm.
perspective on,
Yeah.
self-care, that it's like
Well, it's
self.
so interesting to me, Jane, that you use that Bible verse because I have never thought of that verse as self-care. I think the way I was taught that verse was like very punitive and like self-critical. Like, oh, you've got this whole, mote in your eye, and you, like, how dare you even judge somebody else? You're a horrible sinner. Like, that's how I always took that. I think
Yeah.
not because of not because of what Jesus said when he spoke that verse, but because we were taught that, like,
The lens that we were taught to look at it.
yes,
Yeah.
like we're horrible, sinful people. And so but I love how you just turned that verse on its head and used it as a way to explain self-care, because I totally agree. Like, yeah, if you've got this giant like plank in your eye or whatever, I think the version I read was like plank, maybe. I can't remember. I haven't opened up a Bible in so long.
I haven't either. But I think there's like a version that says like dust.
Ooh.
I think the concept, and again, like I don't we want to get into like the original Aramaic or any of this, but the translation I think was maybe that there's something smaller in your eyes
Interesting.
and something larger in your brother's eyes. So like it's really obvious to you that this person has this insanely large thing in their eyeball. But then even if you have like this tiny like eyelash or dust thing, like you still have to take care of that before you
Wow.
That was how I thought, but I could be completely.
You know what? I like that though. I think that's so beautiful, and that's so beautifully said. And I love that that's how you would explain it to your parents, because that's in language that they could potentially understand.
Yeah.
But yeah, I totally agree. I mean, if we don't take care of ourselves, not only are we unable to function in our lives, but we're also just miserable. Like,
Right.
I have been so miserable for so long. And I kind of came to this realization very recently, actually, that I need to be for myself what I wish other people would be for me. Like, if I need understanding, I need to be understanding with myself. If I need compassion, I need to be compassionate towards myself. If I need, hard, honest truths being spoken to me, I need to do that for myself. I think for most of my life, I've just spent so much time looking to other people for validation, for acceptance, for praise, for love. And it's like, I never gave that to myself. And once I tried doing that, and I started doing that very, very recently, I feel like my whole mindset has changed.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge part of like self-care and self-love and self-compassion.
Yeah. And another thing I've discovered, and like I said before, I mean, this is like a lifelong goal. But one thing I've discovered for me that's just super challenging is I can understand this or explain it sort of on an intellectual level, a mental level, but like feeling it or believing it is just, I think, going to take a long time. And that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good point. And I think one way to get ourselves to the point where we truly believe it and adopt it into our lives is by talking about it to the point where it becomes, like second nature. Because I do think a lot of our beliefs and a lot of our thoughts growing up have been ingrained into our psyches. And it's it's hard to get that. It's hard to change that narrative once it's there. For sure. But yeah, I agree. It's a lifelong process, and I'm glad that we're doing it together and trying to figure it out together. I love it. It makes it so much easier. It just makes it, just a lot easier.
It does. And I, like I was saying about, apologizing to people for the tiny thing, and that validation that, oh no, you're fine, like, thank you so much, that's so sweet, like, kind of thing, I think was something that I really crave, and I still do. Like, I need so much validation.
Same with me.
Yeah, to know that I'm okay. So that's another thing that I'm working on, and again, very new, super recent.
Like a few weeks ago, maybe.
Literally, is self-validation and being able to trust myself.
Yeah.
And not need someone else to be constantly telling me, no, you're fine. That was a good idea. What you said was okay.
Yeah.
Ugh. that's like the work right now for me.
Yeah. Yeah, and trusting yourself, I feel like that's such a good point too. Like, again, we've been taught to not trust ourselves. Our emotions can't be trusted, especially because we're women, right? That's what we were taught, is as a female, you can definitely not trust your emotions because you're much more emotional and sensitive than men are. I mean, that's what the bullshit we were fed.
Oh, yep.
So there's that. And then also, like, I think as people who have gone through trauma, and who have had our boundaries violated in the past, it's hard for us to learn to trust ourselves because, we were in situations where people were not trustworthy.
Yeah.
So that's a really good point too.
Yeah. I've had an enormous amount of people break my trust,
Yeah.
and that's like story time for a later
Yes.
episode for sure. But and I think even admitting that to myself, that they broke my trust, like even saying those words out loud is somehow cathartic for me. Like,
Oh my God, yes.
I think admitting the truth of it and how bad it was too is something that I'm working on. And the other day I almost started crying because my husband said, your parents are really mean to you.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, you're right. They are really mean to me. And I almost started crying like that. I don't know why. I can't even really tell you even now. Like something about just hearing those words out loud or having it come from someone else who was there,
Yes.
like was so validating and like made me want to cry to hear that. Like it was
Yeah.
weird. And I didn't expect that. I didn't expect that kind of emotion just hearing those words. Like,
You know what? I'm not really surprised that that happened though, because that makes me think of, so as you know, I'm a mental health clinician. I'm studying to be a psychologist. And we talked in one of my classes last year actually about trauma and how trauma isn't always traumatic when it happens. Like when your parents are really shitty to you, that's not necessarily um, the most traumatic aspect of that experience. The most traumatic aspect for some people can come when you realize how fucked up and shitty that experience is. So I think
yeah,
your husband pointing out, like, hey, they're really mean to you, you're coming to terms with the fact that this is really shitty. Do you know what I mean? Like in that
yeah,
experience, like hearing that is traumatic because you're seeing this whole thing in a new light.
yeah.
So that
No,
makes
and
sense.
there's a huge aspect of that too. I was reading this book called Educated by
Yes, I love
author.
that book. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. It was like a really weird, surreal, like super triggering trip for me to read that book. I mean, I loved it and I honestly feel like I need to read it again.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm so glad I read it, even though it was a lot for me mentally.
Yeah.
But one thing I realized by reading that is that even though so my childhood was not abusive in the same exact way.
Yeah.
Um, I wasn't physically beaten up or anything like that. But it was still really bad in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
And I think even realizing that and saying that out loud is still really, really hard for me. And I haven't fully like accepted that in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because my whole life was like, no, I know that my parents love me and like what do
Mm-hmm.
I have to complain about? Like people have it so much worse than me, you know.
Yeah.
Why am I even sad? Why am I depressed? Why am I angry? Like, I kept trying to tell myself, you're fine. You don't even have
Mm-hmm.
a reason to be mad or
Mm-hmm.
upset or miserable,
Yeah.
but it really was terrible in a lot of ways. And that doesn't mean that there weren't times when it wasn't, or that my parents didn't love me, or that, you
Right.
know, there weren't positive moments, or that anything positive came from that. It's just that
Right.
there was a lot of trauma there that I need to just own.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that book is so good. I actually
Yeah.
have it on audiobook. I like listening to
Ooh.
it sometimes when I drive, but I get really, really angry. I get livid, to use the name of our podcast.
Ooh.
I get really pissed off sometimes when I like listen to it because it's so there's so many things I can relate to and then so many things that I can't relate to, but I'm still like like I see the toxicity of like religious trauma,
Yeah.
you know, and the fact that that is a thing in our world pisses me off. I'm
Can you
wondering,
remember? Oh,
yeah,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, you go.
Do you remember a moment
Yeah.
like when you first acknowledged or, I don't know, said the words to yourself
Mm.
that you had trauma in your childhood? Like, hey, that was really bad. Like, actually, that was really awful.
Yeah.
Do you
I think,
remember, like,
yeah. I think honestly, it didn't happen until maybe 3 years ago when I started therapy with my current therapist.
wow, that reason?
Um, yeah, I think that was
Wow.
the first time when I was like, yes, that was traumatic. Yes, that was fucked up. That was abusive. That was neglectful. Like,
Yeah,
similar to you, I never dared use those words to describe because, again, like, yeah, my childhood was fine. It was better than most, right? Like,
right,
when you think about the world in general and how many people live in abhorrent poverty and how many people go through horrible things and like are sold into sex slavery and like, you know what I mean? Like I
right.
felt like I had no right to say to myself this was really difficult and traumatic for me. And I think my therapist, who's incredible and I love her, she really forced me, not forced me, but she really gave me the space to like look at what I had been through. And I'm pretty sure she was the first one who suggested like, oh, that sounds like that was pretty traumatic, you know? And similar to you and your husband, it's like when somebody else uses those words for you, it gives you permission to admit, yeah, this is what's going on.
Right.
So yeah, I think for me it was in therapy maybe, yeah, maybe like 3 years ago. What about for you?
Man, I think it took a while, even pretty recently, for me to admit that I'm depressed and to like say that out
Mm-hmm.
was really hard.
Yeah.
Um, so I think I'm like barely able to say that my childhood was traumatic without
Yeah.
feeling like I'm lying to you. Like
Mm-hmm.
even right now as I'm saying that, I feel like guilty.
Yeah.
Like I shouldn't even be describing my childhood that way.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I need to give you examples. Like
You
this was
need to
so
prove it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow.
So maybe I'm not even there yet. Like maybe it's
Mm-hmm.
just I can say it in concept and in theory and like
Mm-hmm.
I know that I should be okay with this and saying it out loud. Um I know that it's true. I know that it was fucked up.
Yeah.
Um like even given the events of the past couple of months in my family,
Mm-hmm.
I know that it's fucked up.
Yeah.
Um but admitting that and owning that, I don't know, I
Yeah.
still sometimes feel like I'm lying.
Yeah. You know, that's so interesting because I had a patient who I was seeing for therapy and she was sexually abused as a child by a family member. And she
Mhm.
told me when she was describing these events to me, she told me the same thing that you're saying. Like, I feel like I made this up in my head. I feel like I'm lying and I need to prove to you that this happened.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a characteristic of trauma. Um
Mm-hmm.
you know, and like that's what that is. That's trauma, that's broken trust, that's, you know, abuse, emotional neglect. Like that's a side effect of that. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, that is. It's fascinating. I never really thought of it. But that's why we're doing this, and I'm so glad we are
Exactly.
because literally I even just in the past few minutes, I'm like,
Yeah.
this is so great. I'm getting to say this
Mind
out
blown.
loud. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, totally. Well, and I have a question for you. So we talked a lot about some of the more negative aspects of our religious upbringing. I wonder if there's anything positive or helpful that you can think of, that came from your religious upbringing, or maybe not even your religious upbringing, but like your sense of spirituality, um, or your relationship with God, if that's there. Can you think of anything that's positive or helpful that you take away from all of this?
I think one of the biggest things about the church that I still love is the music.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was a really special thing to me, and it still is. It's not like a a skill that I use very often, or is that like helpful in my life. But I learned, you know, there's like modal tones in the church.
Mm-hmm.
I've learned the different tones for a certain um, type of service.
Yeah.
Um, and I love them. It's really sentimental to me now, even when I hear them.
Yeah.
So that was really special. Something about like the harmony, like lifting up your voices together, singing together. I love how um, Orthodoxy encourages, well, generally, I guess it's not always true of every single church, but generally,
Mm-hmm.
um, congregational singing is encouraged, and I
Yes.
love that.
I do too.
Not so great in a pandemic, but
Yeah, that kind of messes
generally,
things up.
yeah, generally it's a really positive thing, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It encourages participation, which I love. So you're not just standing there
Yeah.
observing like the pageantry, or um, you're not just like a bystander, like watching a play for your entertainment. Like you're
Yeah.
participating, you're an active part of it. So that I really love. Um, Beyond that, I would say that I have been given the opportunity to speak to a lot of people that I wouldn't normally
Yeah.
have gotten to. I'm an American, which is kind of weird because Orthodoxy is such an ethnic church and
Yeah.
religion.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I definitely felt like a fraud a lot of times,
Mm.
like a stranger in my own sort of religion, because even though we were part of this larger church, I always
Yeah.
felt like an outsider, even
Yeah.
in the church generally, and especially because my parents did things differently than a lot of people, and
And your parents were converts,
yeah,
so they weren't born into this religion like you were.
right,
So that impacts, yeah, a lot of it too.
right. So I got exposed to a lot of people from different countries,
Yeah.
different languages. Honestly, I don't think you and I would be friends if it weren't for the church, you know?
I totally agree. I don't think, yeah, I totally agree. I feel like us being Orthodox was just such a unifying, um, feature of our friendship. Uh,
Yeah,
and even if we were friends, I don't know that we would have been as close as we are.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you though? When you think back?
I agree with you. I think there's a lot of beauty within the Orthodox Church. Like I'm thinking of the iconography and the
Yeah.
gorgeous icons. They always bring me comfort. Like looking at saints, um, and looking at the Mother of God, and you know, just getting a lot of comfort from that and from the music. I think for me though, the one thing that really sticks out that has always kind of stuck with me, um, and this is gonna reveal what a horrible Orthodox I am. But what is that prayer to the Holy Spirit? O
Oh,
Heavenly
oh,
King, the
Heavenly King.
Comforter. Yes, the Spirit
Yeah.
of truth, who are everywhere present and filling on all things. Like that part, who are everywhere present and filling all things. That to me is just like something I like to repeat to myself. So I wouldn't necessarily call myself like ultra orthodox anymore. I don't really know what label to put on myself anymore. I do consider myself a Christian and a follower of Jesus, but not in a traditional sense by any means. I don't think that Christianity is the truth with a capital T anymore. Um, but I use that prayer as a way to remind myself what I believe about God, which is that God is everywhere present and filling all things, like literally filling this room right now, whether or not I can feel God's presence. Like I think there's like inherently a divine like beauty to all things, to all people, even the worst of the worst, like murderers, I think have some component of the divine within them. So to me, that's my biggest takeaway from the Orthodox Church, is just
You gave
that.
me
Like,
tingles.
what's that?
You gave me tingles.
Did I?
Yeah,
I don't know. I just feel
that was
like
well
that's so
said.
powerful, you know? And it's a prayer that I was pretty much forced to pray every single night because my parents would make me, and my sisters do these nightly prayers with them. And that was always what we started with. And so as much as I hated those prayers, and as much as I disagree with the Orthodox Church and with other sects of Christianity, like that to me, that like little phrase has carried me through a lot of shit, to be honest.
Well, and it's kind of fascinating too that like more largely I feel like, and I'm not going to speak for you, but for me, the church has kind of inflicted a lot of trauma on me.
Oh yeah.
And I'm still struggling with that and trying to figure out like where I stand with that and what I want to do with that.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating to me that something that caused trauma and causes a lot of trauma for a lot of people could also provide this comfort in different.
Yeah.
But maybe it's separated out, right? Because maybe it's the people. There's some people
Absolutely.
in the church that use the church as this vehicle for themselves.
Yes.
But maybe the church in its purest form can be comforting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think at least God in God's purest form can be comforting. Because I think that's such a good point. I think human beings just mess a lot of things up. And I think for a very long time, and I'm sure we'll do an episode on like what we think about God or whatever. Yeah. But just listening to you talk, that made me think of like all the times that I projected hurtful people onto God and like kind of looked at God as having those characteristics because that's what I was surrounded by. Like, for example, my dad, a lot of times, some of his most, judgmental and hurtful characteristics I projected onto God. And I was like, this is why, like for a while I was an atheist pretty much. And I was like, this is why I don't believe in God. This is why I don't believe in religion, is because this is the way God is. And then when I started going to therapy and really looking at my beliefs, like I realized that's really not who God is, not to me at least. And I was just kind of projecting all these horrible characteristics that I saw modeled around me onto what I thought God was. So yeah, I think we do need to do a little bit of separation. Like, here are the human beings who are within the church and who believe in God, and then here is who I think God actually is.
Yeah. Well, and that goes against what we were taught.
Oh, absolutely. I would be kicked out of like whatever Orthodox church right now because
but that God could mean different things to different people.
That's not allowed. No.
Ooh,
yeah.
Me.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, that was not allowed. But it's like, anyway, I'll save that for another episode, but I disagree.
Well, maybe this is a good place to start closing for this particular introductory episode. Thanks for making it this far. If anyone out there has made it.
Whoever is listening right now. Yeah.
So we talked about ending with something that we're livid about and something that we're living for. It's a very clever turn of phrase that Julie came up with.
Thank you.
Would you like to start?
Sure, yeah. So what am I livid about this week? I think, I've been very livid just about the state of our world right now. And just with coronavirus, that's been going on for a while now. The way people are being treated, just in our American society, Black Lives Matter movement, racism, sexism. I don't know. That's too much to be livid about, but I feel like it's so much on the forefront of my mind. Like that's constantly what I'm thinking about, what I'm reading about. It's just all these injustices in our society. So I think
it's like extra bad right now, I feel.
It's really bad right now. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, to be completely honest, if I'm completely honest with you, I think I'm mostly livid about our political system. Like, I'm pretty pissed that we have a two-party system. And if I had to pick one party, I would 100% say I'm Democrat. However, I'm sick and tired of having to choose the lesser of two evils because that's the only option we have. Like, I wish this was different. You know what I mean? Like, to be completely honest with you, Joe Biden wouldn't be my number one. If I could pick from any of the candidates who are running, who are in the running, prior to him being announced as the pick, I would not have chosen him. And it kind of pisses me off that we have to choose between him and Trump come November. So I'm pretty pissed about the political state of things. I guess that's what I'm livid about. Do you want to talk about what you're livid about? And then we can go into what we're living for.
Yeah, you know what makes me really upset is how people are super selfish and want to do whatever is most convenient for them, and they don't think about other people and how their actions affect other people. For example, wear a fucking mask. I don't give a fuck who you are.
Oh my God.
Like, and worst case scenario, if the science is all wrong and it does nothing, like, oh, you inconvenience yourself a tiny bit, like the greater good. Wow. That
I don't get the mask thing at all. I do not understand why people get so pissed about having to wear a mask. So I'm with you.
Completely unfathomable to me how irate people are for this tiny thing. And then the other thing that really bugs me, like kind of along those same lines, are the people who are pushing to go back to school, because it is so unreasonable. And I know that there are already a lot of people who are back in school right now. A lot of them have already started. It hurts my heart because while online learning is a struggle and certainly not perfect, and in a lot of cases really fucking bad, because especially for those who cannot afford to have internet access or whatever your situation is, obviously that's shitty on a whole other level. But it's not a matter of like if somebody gets coronavirus, it's a matter of when. And there just simply aren't enough teachers to sustain like having that happen and then shutting down and starting over. I mean, it's just it was probably a matter of like a couple weeks, and it's just so stupid to me that people are fighting for this completely illogical and unnecessary like push to start again, and then for what? So that more people can die.
What do you think that's about? Like, why do you think people are pushing so much for that?
I think that, like a lot of things, fear is at the heart of a lot of really irrational decisions like that. I think that people want to pretend that this isn't happening and just go back to normal. Like, and you know, they don't know somebody who died from coronavirus. They don't know anybody who has COVID. They're just like, why, you know, oh, isn't it weird and convenient that this is happening during an election year? And they want to make it about, you know, politics or some kind of government conspiracy or like whatever the fuck. And I know that's not always like the argument. There's a lot out there, but
but a lot of the arguments are about that.
I think to accept like the reasoning behind why schools can't go back to normal is to admit to yourself that this is really happening and this is really fucking terrible and unprecedented.
And it's terrifying.
Yeah, and that's kind of like, it goes back to us talking about our goddamn trauma. Like, this is literally the same thing. Like, because if you admit that this happened, then you have to deal with it and own it, and it's hard and it's painful. Anyway.
That is such a good point. Yeah, that's such a good parallel between trauma and that. I totally agree. I think you're spot on. I think if we admit that we can't open up schools, we're basically saying we're kind of powerless. We don't know what the hell we're doing right now. And this is absolutely terrifying. And instead of feeling that, we want to pretend like everything's normal. Yeah, you know, our mutual friend, the social worker, Abby, she is going back to in-person teaching. Well, she doesn't teach, but in-person school tomorrow. And they're like,
I didn't hear that because I thought they flip-flopped a couple times. I thought they weren't.
So she just texted me this morning and said they're doing in person. I think it sounds like they're going back and forth. Like they're doing some in person and then they're switching to virtual. So it's kind of like every other week kind of thing. But even that to me is like, okay, she works in an elementary
Oh
school.
my God.
Like, it's terrifying. And I'm scared for her health and safety, you
Right.
know? Oh my gosh. Yeah. No,
Not
I'm with you on that.
great. Yeah.
No. Oh, and also here's the other thing about masks. I wanted to tell you about this and I totally forgot.
Tell me.
So there are these masks out there that are mesh.
Stop it.
And they basically have holes
No.
in them. And all of the Karens out there are wearing them and posting like reviews on Amazon, like, this is the cutest mask ever. And like,
Stop
I got
it.
so many compliments
Is it
on
like
it.
a
Yeah. And it's
fucking
like,
piece
dude,
of fishnet stocking over their face? Like, what are you talking about?
pretty much. Pretty much. It's like, I don't even know if it's like plastic or what it is, but it's a literal mesh. Like there's holes all over. It's like bejeweled, bedazzled, and like holes
No.
all, like you can see people's faces.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's basically not a mask. And I'm just like, what? Like, you would rather wear that than just wear a mask? Like, at that point, just wear a mask because that doesn't even make sense.
I have not even seen that, but that blows my fucking mind.
I'll have to send you a
Yeah.
picture because it's ridiculous.
Holy
Yeah.
cow. I also read
Yep.
about there's a particular brand, which I can't remember right now, that actually spreads droplets even more. So, like, something about the construction of it or the material actually,
Yeah.
when you breathe, I guess, distributes
Oh,
even
God.
more particle. Like, it splits the particles even more and projects
Okay,
them
is it the
further.
kind that they sell at Walgreens, like those stupid surgical masks that don't do
Oh no,
shit?
I think it was like the kind that's like supposed to be athletic. Like it goes around, it's like a
Oh.
piece of cloth that goes around your whole neck and your face.
Oh, I
There,
haven't
I
seen those.
forget the name
Okay.
of it.
Well, I'll make sure not to buy that because that
But they
sounds
did a
stupid as
study and
hell.
it was like, certain, like a cloth mask was, I don't know, like 50%, like cuts down the particles like 50% or something. But this one was like
Okay.
110%. So it's like more
Wow.
than not wearing a mask. Isn't that insane?
Wow. That is
I'll have to
horrible.
like look up my sources, but it was an article I read. Yeah.
Wow. Oh, man.
Anyways, shifting to
Anyway,
more
enough with the
positive. Yeah.
negative. Yeah. What are you living for this week, Jane?
Girl, I'm trying to find some small things in life to appreciate.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Um, one thing that I've been living for are fucking Mounds bars. I love them. I have a
Yeah.
bag of them. They're small and bite-sized.
They're delicious. Oh, oh my gosh, those are the
They're
best
so
kind.
great.
Yes.
I like how it's dark chocolate, so they're not as sweet. I like chewing on little bits of coconut. Um, they make me happy. So that's been one thing. I know it's really tiny, but
Oh my God, I love it. No, take joy in the small things.
that, and I am trying to savor these last few days of summer weather because I know
Yes.
that fall and winter is just around the corner, and I'm trying to stave off depression when the sun starts setting earlier, and well, I'm just
Yeah.
trying to enjoy how we can hang out outside right now, and we have a new puppy and she's growing up really fast, but I to like
Yeah.
be in the moment and enjoy her while she's small and still smells like a
She's so
puppy.
cute.
So
Yeah.
those little things, we're trying to hang on to those moments.
That's wonderful. I love
What about
that.
you?
Hey, good call about the little Mars
Yeah.
bars because I kind of forget those are a thing. Yeah, for me right now, one thing that's been actually giving me a lot of joy is I don't know if you ever watched any of those Japanese movies from back in the 90s or early 2000s. It's like by Miyazaki. He's like a famous Japanese director, and they're animated films like Spirited Away, if you ever heard of
Oh,
that one.
I've heard really, really good things, but I have not actually watched it.
It is so good. I used to watch it as a kid. Like,
Okay.
I used to watch all of his movies, Miyazaki's, like, all of his animated movies as a kid. And I just recently got a free trial of HBO Max, and they have all of his films
Oh my
on
God.
there. And I've just been spending time watching those while I'm, like, washing dishes or folding
Yeah.
laundry. And it just brings back so many, like, positive childhood memories. It makes me feel like a little kid
I
again.
love
Like,
that.
you know,
Yeah.
and I just like, and that's something that actually my therapist suggested I do. She said, like, find something that's soothing to you, that you found soothing as a child, and do that, and like engage in that activity as a way to like practice self-soothing and like
Aw,
increase positive
that makes a lot
emotions.
of
And
sense.
that's been, oh my gosh, it's been so amazing. Like, I just get warm, fuzzy feelings watching those movies. So yeah, right now I'm watching Spirited Away. My Neighbor Totoro is like on the back, you know, backlog for later. Kiki's Delivery Service, like, all of his movies are so good. So yeah, if you haven't had a chance to watch them,
Yeah,
definitely
I'm gonna have to look
give it a
that
shot.
up.
They're kind of, honestly, they're kind of fucked up sometimes. Like, they're kind of dark sometimes. Like, Spirited Away has some creepy creatures in there.
Ooh,
And I think as a kid, I used to be really freaked out. And now as an adult, I'm like so fascinated by all the different weird little monsters that he draws up.
that's
But yeah, that's what I'm living for this week.
I love it. I'm gonna have to look that up. It
Yeah,
sounds
do
cute.
it.
I mean, I could get
Yeah.
into some weird little monsters.
Oh, it's totally up your alley. You would be into it. I definitely think you would be.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, how do we end this thing?
I don't know. This is pretty good. How are you feeling? I'm feeling
I
pretty
feel
good about
great.
this.
I feel
Yeah.
awesome.
I feel rejuvenated after talking to you.
Yeah.
I'm
I'm
excited.
pumped.
I can't wait to do it again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
This was
Yeah,
fantastic.
I don't
And
know.
I honestly feel like I learned something about myself just in the last hour.
Me too. I definitely feel it too. Yeah. Thank you for always being that person for me that I can go to and talk to.
Oh my God, thank you. I don't know what I would do without you. I love
Same. I love you
you.
too. I think we can
All
end it
right.
there. I mean,
Okay.
all right. Thanks, everyone. Whoever was listening. We will be back with more very
Whoop whoop.
soon. Yay.